While he was praying, his face changed in appearance, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, two men were conversing with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his exodus that he was going to accomplish in Jerusalem. Peter and his companions had been overcome by sleep, but becoming fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. As they were about to part from him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But he did not know what he was saying. While he was still speaking, a cloud came and cast a shadow over them, and they became frightened when they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my chosen son. Listen to him." After the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. They fell silent and did not at the time tell anyone what they had seen. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
On this second Sunday of Lent, all three of our readings have us looking up to the sky, looking up to the heavens. In the first reading from Genesis, we join Abram as he is instructed to look up at the sky, count the stars if you can. You know, there is something very profound when gazing at the sky. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of getting away from the light pollution of the city and going out into the country on a clear night. Stargazing is incredibly spiritual. You see the many galaxies and formations, and you know, if you look long enough, you'll likely see a shooting star dart across the vast canvas of God's wonderful creation. In fact, I remember a few years ago when I was looking up at the sky, I saw the space station streak across that star-filled sky. As Abram gazed heavenward, God promised him that his descendants will be as numerous as those stars in the sky. Abraham put his faith in the Lord. Abraham's faith is sealed with a covenant that was initiated by God. Our God, indeed, as we just sang today in the psalm, is our light and our salvation. In the second reading, Paul has us continue looking up. He reminds us that our citizenship is in heaven. Get your mind off earthly things and stand firm. Stand firm in the Lord. And in today's gospel, we are still looking up to the heavens. On the second Sunday each Lent, we always hear the story of Jesus' transfiguration. In fact, all three of these synoptic gospels record the story of the transfiguration. In fact, the custom of reading today's gospel near the start of Lent may have come from an ancient tradition. A tradition that held that the transfiguration of Jesus took place about 40 days before Good Friday. During this Lenten season, perhaps we might look at the transfiguration in the larger context of the Paschal mystery. The transfiguration occurs on a mountaintop. So just imagine Jesus inviting you to climb the mountain along with Peter, James, and John. You get up there and you see Jesus praying. The 3 disciples are asleep. You know, we will find those 3 disciples sleeping again while Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane right before his passion and his death. So when Peter and James and John awake, they find Jesus changed in appearance. His clothes became dazzling white. Someone once described it as wedding cake white. And along with Jesus is Elijah and Moses. Now we know about those 2 figures, one representing the law and one representing the prophets. Then Luke tells us that they were in some sort of dialogue, some sort of conversation. Exactly what were they talking about? Luke tells us that Jesus was talking about his later accomplishments in Jerusalem. This is about Jesus' own exodus, Jesus' departure to God through his passion and death, which will happen in Jerusalem. The marvel of the transfiguration helped strengthen those apostles and help them grow deeper in their understanding of what was to come. It helped them to eventually move from the scandal of the cross from their hearts to the glorious victory that lies ahead. And what happens next on that mountaintop is likely to resonate with each one of us. That's if we are truly honest with ourselves. Peter realized he was in the midst of divine glory. Peter wants to hang out there for a long time, camp out in the comfort of this glorious scene. He wishes to build earthly tents for those two heavenly beings. In a sense, Peter wants time to simply stand still, to remain there in the moment of true ecstasy. And how much are we like Peter? We've all had those mountaintop experiences in our everyday life when we feel the intimate presence of God. It may have come the first time we deeply fell in love. It could have come at the birth of our first child. It could have come when your first grandchild can finally call you grandpa, and you can actually understand what he said. In our spiritual journey, we may have had mountaintop experiences on a retreat or from making a good confession and basking in God's unconditional love for us. Peter wanted to stay on that mountaintop and avoid going down the mountain to face what will become the suffering and death of his friend Jesus, not to mention his very own destiny. You know, I would rather stay in those mountaintop experiences rather than confront difficult times that life often throws at us. Seems God is so easily present when things are going smoothly. But you know, there are those times when we are forced out of our comfort zone to unite our sufferings with those of Jesus on the cross. During difficult times, I must remind myself that Jesus did not come to explain away suffering or to remove it. He came to fill it with his presence. When we listen closely enough, we will hear the reassuring voice of God, God who remains with us through it all. Peter, James, and John heard that voice from the cloud. This is my chosen son. Listen to him. Listening to him meant Peter, James, and John must literally get their heads out of the clouds and realize that discipleship with Jesus will cut them deep to the core. This time of Lent might be a time to remind ourselves that we can't keep looking up to heaven, expecting mountaintop experiences without first going through those desert times in our lives. True transformation of ourselves can only occur when we navigate through the difficult times. Those times in the dry and dusty desert in our prayer life. Those difficult times when we experience the ultimate love, the untimely love of a lost one, or the sudden loss of a job. We know how much we grow from praying through the tough times, only to come out stronger and more confident. Especially during Lent, as Christians, we must willingly share in the Paschal mystery, the dying and rising of Jesus. The transfiguration of Jesus prefigures the transformation in glory to which we are called by our sharing in that Paschal mystery. At the Eucharist this morning, may we ask God for the grace to remain awake and attentive to Jesus and to one another. We ask for the grace and the strength to help us transform our lives during this Lenten season through the discipline of daily prayer, redemptive fasting, and generous almsgiving.